Chapter 18. Gladiator in arena, Consilium Capit. Webb blinked, as if that might reset her brain so she could dismiss who she couldn't possibly be seeing. Yolanda Prime, the original, the start of a long, sad chain of lost quaddies. But she couldn't be. She was dead. She was staring at a hologram, like Abelhard, no more than pixels in light. But she'd recognize Webb's face, and based on the furrow in her brow, her own name. Yolanda. She rolled it around on her tongue. That's familiar. It's your name. Webb couldn't keep the quiver out of her voice. My name is Sunshine. Your name, Webb told her, is Senior Technician Hayashi Yolanda. I'm Webb. Joni Weber. We were quaddies. Do you remember? A blank stare. Quaddies? Quad mates. We shared a room half the size of this one. You, me, Frankie, and Chels. Do you remember them? Baldy and the Jarhead? Or Chels's beau, Rob? You're right. She married him. She shook her head. I'm sorry. You worked in InfoSec, remember? You were a security programmer. Please transport me to the repair bay, said Dennis. She glanced at the head. Is he okay? That's a cog. You used to work on them. Do you remember cogs? She tilted her head. The Collective Operations Group. Yes! Annoying as hell and strong as bulls. What else? I can't. She looked ready to cry. Why don't I remember? Webb didn't know what to say. We thought you died. She flinched. Died? You were lost in a teleporter stream. They tried beaming you up through an ion storm and your signature just fell apart. A slow nod. That's what Jared said. A chill walked down Webb's spine. Jared? There wasn't enough of me left to rematerialize, Yolanda muttered. He didn't give up on me, though. He caught the pieces of me, ran me through these to reconstruct my signature. He saved me. Her smile seemed forced. Webb checked the console. The hollow emitters were indeed running, but they weren't projecting a full figure. They were patching her instead, here and there, filling in gaps throughout her skeletal and lymphatic system and her neural pathways. Hollow medicine. Webb had read about it. Temporary holographic organs as an emergency stopgap to keep moribund patients alive long enough to receive medical attention. I don't think I've ever had other visitors. Yolanda tightened her robe. Do you think he'll be mad? Webb tapped a few keys and studied the monitor. The emitters were reconstructing more of Yolanda's neurology than was necessary. There was more of her raw signature stored in the buffer, zettabytes of memory engrams that hadn't been loaded. She checked the projection matrix. The Yolanda Gestalt, the woman who called herself Sunshine, read as a whole. Huh. You should go. She crossed her arms. You shouldn't be here. Please go now. One sec. Webb tapped more keys, discovered a secondary program running in parallel with the reconstruction. There's another program here. A proprietary Arcade 1. She tapped its info stamp. It's... Webb's lip curled. He's been supplementing your memory with a tradwife program. I don't know what that is. It's a subservience program. Behavioral modifications for arcade sprites. Webb saw red. Her pulse throbbed so hard her fingers hurt. It's overwriting your memory. Is that bad? Yolanda looked so lost, so innocent, so helpless, entirely by design. Webb forced a lid on her temper, pounded keys with shaking hands. I'm taking it offline. I'm loading the rest of your engrams from the TeepSig. Will it hurt? Emotionally? I imagine so. She hit compile. A light flickered in Prime's eyes. She teetered and nearly collapsed. Then she drew herself upright, firmly planted her feet. A fog seemed to lift from her eyes. Webb? Webb seized her shoulders. It's me! I'm here! What do you remember? Yolanda squeezed her eyes shut. I'm in InfoSec? A computer tech? A killer one. Yes. What else? The fuck am I wearing? Focus. What else do you remember? Her face twisted. He never fixed me. Not all the way. He tried it once, and whoa, did I let him have it. He wouldn't let me go. And then he erased. Oh my God. She sunk to the floor, wrapped her arms around herself. Get this fucking thing off me! Webb yanked a uniform out of the officer's dresser and draped it around Yolanda's shoulders. Its name tag jumped out at her. Motherfucker! Jared Blackwell? Yolanda hurled the uniform away, wrapped the bed's comforter around her. He fished enough of my sig out of the ether to patch me with that fuckdoll program. He even told me what he was doing, how he had to keep me here so I'd be safe. I said, no fucking way. I'm going to tell the captain. I'm telling everyone. Her chin trembled. That's the last solid. He overwrote your memory. Webb had to fight to keep from yelling. The rest is just nightmares. Oh, God. She sunk into herself. The things he made me. She swallowed. He made me grateful. Like I existed to reward him for saving me. Webb wanted to scream, wanted to tear the room apart. The Coalition had to ban tradwife programs from its arcades after too many crewmen had got addicted to completely submissive and perpetually aroused romantic partners, which had led to a shocking spike in divorces and lowered birth rates, and a lucrative black market for tradwife software. We are going to nail him to the fucking wall. Yolanda looked lost and scared. How long have I been here? I'm never on for more than a couple hours at a time. Webb's stomach lurched. He turns you off? He kills me, Webb. Her eyes swam. Every time he gets scared or surprised, or if I do something wrong, I'm not demure enough, or I hesitate before I reach for his... He turns me off without saving. I die every time. Webb pressed trembling fingers to her lips. If he kept force quitting the program, her eyes went to the console, to the diagnostic readout there. No, it's decay, isn't it? Yolanda pressed her mouth into a flat line. Teleporter decay. He's copied and recopied my SIGs so many times, my physiology's breaking down. She looked like she just received a terminal diagnosis. Is it the usual stuff? Webb nodded numbly. Capillaries, bone marrow, a lot of neural pathways, all bits he'd patch with arcade hollows. How many times? Yolanda steeled herself. How many times has he reloaded me? Webb winced at the console. Over 300. Her mind spun. She had a hard time remembering why she'd even come. Right, to warn the bridge. The Xenos. She couldn't stay. I'm getting you out of here. A slow smile. I appreciate that. I know you mean it. Yolanda glanced at the hollow emitters. But if I leave the field, I'll fall apart. Webb's stomach dropped. Of course. The holographic patches would vanish. The lost gaps in her bone marrow, blood vessels, and neurons would reopen. She'd unravel like a rag doll with its stitching pulled. I can't just leave you here. Yolanda looked her straight in the eye. There is something you can do for me. What? Anything. Let me die, said Yolanda Prime. One last time. What elder? Aide hiccuped. The one Webb met, Frankie called up to her. What? Webb met? When? Down on the planet. She touched my mind as well, said the sorrel. It was she who advised me to go into hiding, which I did shortly after I made love to your captain. You... Frankie stopped. You did what now? It was his idea, said the ambassador. I did not wish to appear rude. I had no idea you were compatible. Yes, but only the one way.
It was all in the xenobiology report.
How was it?
Asked 8. Brief. If we could continue, please. We are in mortal peril.
Right.
8 scrabbled on through the crawl spaces. Mind the cables.
Where exactly are we headed?
Asked Frankie.
A safe spot,
said 8. Where the away team for engineering is prepping.
The armory?
God, no. Yeah. The Armstrongs have taken it over.
Then where?
The repair bay, where they stash all the equipment damaged during away missions.
Including engineering tools.
Frankie grinned.
Smart.
And weapons? Asked the Sorrel.
Normally, yes,
said 8.
but they've confiscated those parts.
Ah,
don't fret,
8 told her.
We got a bunch of angry engineers in a room full of machine tools. We'll come up with something.
She rolled onto her back.
We're here.
8 popped open the grate above. Red sleeved arms reached down to help her up. Frankie followed her into the repair bay, where Dewey greeted her with a lopsided grin.
There you are, Baldy.
Frankie beamed.
Chief, it's good to see you.
Enough of this saccharine shit. Back to work. I need you at the teleporter. We can reroute and fix it, but you're the expert operator. Frankie didn't see any teleporter controls.
Is there a console?
Shit, no. Dewey held up a datapad sprouting with cables. Just this. Had to run the controls for the internal scanners to bypass Indy. Frankie let out a low whistle.
Internal scanners can't lock on with the teleporter beam.
And that's why we need an expert. She handed Frankie the pad, rebalanced herself on her crutches. Use the scanners to pinpoint any survivors in the infested decks. Then hand enter their coordinates and teep them up here.
Blind?
Said Frankie.
I'd be teeping them blind.
Yep. Once again, expert. A strangled growl from the floor. Frankie spotted a young Armstrong tied up and gagged in the corner. She looked from him to Dewey.
Who's that?
That's Bilson, said Dewey. He's in charge here. Say hi, Bilson. He growled through his gag. Frankie raised an eyebrow. Dewey looked insulted. I'm not an idiot. We took a hollow of him. She turned towards the door. Bilson, how you doing out there?
All's well, Chief,
said Bilson's voice from the corridor.
I see,
said Frankie. Right. Dewey lit a cigarette. Here's the plan. Venting the ship could cripple us, but I expect Blackwell will still try it. He's planning to send us to engineering first, unarmed.
The damage I did to the Nexus shield should hold them up for another hour or so,
said 8. Good girl. In the meantime, Frankie pulls in survivors, and we build numbers here until we can retake the ship.
By force?
Asked Frankie. If it comes to that, I hope it doesn't.
You know,
yeah,
we could just teleport Blackwell into space.
All eyes turned to 8. I like her. Dewey took a long drag. You're wasted, an Agrotech girl.
There's no clear chain of command after him,
8 continued.
They'd fall into disarray.
That would be murder, said Frankie. 8 clenched her jaw.
They murdered Sivos.
And they'll be held accountable, said Dewey. But only if we retake the ship by the rules, okay? Love the idea. Keep thinking like that. But no, we're not spacing our captain.
My people are on their way, said the Sorrel. I sent an extraction request after sentiment on the ship turned against me. They may be willing to help us.
We should warn them, said Dewey. The Liberator's on the way, and she's a warship.
All's well, Commander,
Bilson's hollow said outside. Dewey paled. Indy, lock the door. A negative chime.
Unable to comply.
The door slid open. Skull-masked gunmen opened fire, felling the nearest redshirts like so many bowling pins. The rest scattered to the walls or ducked behind debris.
Hold your fire,
barked Loomis.
Hands up.
Frankie knelt by 8's crumpled body. She was still breathing, but just barely. A third-degree burn smoking through her uniform. She glared at Loomis.
You're on max stun. That's enough to drop a horse.
Better than you traitors deserve.
Jacobs yanked down his skull mask.
You're lucky it's not on kill,
he smirked.
Yet.
Let me, said Loomis. I'm ready to start killing you motherfuckers.
Patience,
said Jacobs.
The captain would like a word first. For now, cuff them.
Please, Yolanda squeezed Webb's hands. Erase me. Let me go. Just let the pattern decay. Webb's stomach felt heavy, her ribs too tight. I'm not going to kill you. I'm used to it. It'll be like going to sleep. Only I won't have to wake up to him again. Webb shook her head. There has to be a way to get you out of here. There isn't. I won't accept that. I've tried, said Yolanda. You think I haven't tried? Whenever I start to remember, he wipes me, reverts me back to whatever previous version he had saved, which only speeds the decay. Webb punched the bed. Think, she told herself. There is always a solution. There's always a workaround. I am getting you out of here. You can't. Yolanda rocked on the bed. The hollow emitters. Webb's mind lit up like a magnesium flare. She shot to her feet. If Abelhard can walk out of the arcade, then so can you. Prime stopped rocking. Who? Webb peeled an emitter open. I'm going to scrap their range governors. Won't that shut me off? I don't think so. Trust me, this worked for a friend of mine. Those are very precisely calibrated. They are. Webb had to fight to keep her hand steady. To keep you from leaving the room. Not just that. Their range ends a meter from the control interface, so that if I remembered... Webb's rage started bubbling again. You couldn't reach the controls. My hand starts to de-res if I reach out. It goes numb and starts to bleed, like radiation sickness from hell. She massaged her palm. Sometimes he just wipes me periodically to make sure I'm blank. The only way I know time has passed is when there are changes in the room. A new plant, a picture out of place. The torpedo bay was a big one. When did that happen? Feels like a year ago. Hang on. The emitter sparked as Webb yanked out its range governor. Yolanda Prime's features seemed to pixelate for a second. She steadied herself against the emitter. You okay? A little woozy, she straightened. Otherwise, fine. No, I am so not fine. Webb stepped back between the plane of emitters. You ready to give it a try? Yolanda let out a breath, stretched her hand out beyond the emitters towards the controls. She inhaled sharply when her fingers brushed the console. Oh, God. Oh, thank you. Her eyes shimmered. She stroked the console. She glanced up at Webb with a trembling smirk. How far does the range extend? As far as I know, the edges of the ship. Let's scrap the other governors to be sure. Prime bared her teeth. I am gonna destroy that bastard. That bastard is armed. Webb yanked out another governor. And so are the bastards who worship him. We, on the other hand, are not. Yolanda tapped her chin. Say, you ever get that promotion? Webb blurted a laugh. Of course not. Hardly matters now. Prime glanced at Dennis's head and grinned. I think it does. I'd say you're overdue. Her hands danced over the controls. Webb peered over her shoulder. What are you doing? No peeking, said Prime. Let an infotech work. The cog at the ops station turned towards the command dais. The Nexus shield has been repaired, Captain. About fucking time, thought Blackwell. And the force fields? Our simulations indicate that they will hold in case of depressurization. Finally, some good news. He hit a button on his chair. Bring them in. Armstrong's marched in a clump of dispirited red shirts and cuffs. His chief engineer, and, to his surprise, the Sorrel ambassador.
These are our saboteurs,
Loomis jerked a thumb towards the unconscious tech hanging between her fellows.
including Agent 8.
He cracked her in the head with his rifle butt, knocking her to the deck.
Well, that looked like it hurt.
Blackwell flicked his gaze towards Dewey and the ambassador.
Where's she been?
The teleporter stream.
Jacobs looked sidelong at Fuller.
You can guess who was hiding her.
No surprises there.
He shook his head at Dewey.
I wish I could say I expected better of you, Chief. I heard every bit of your ridiculous little plan.
Dewey narrowed her eyes.
The comms were down. Well, yes, but Indy wasn't. She helpfully forwarded your entire conversation to me.
Dewey looked at the ceiling.
more disappointed than angry.
And after all the times I fixed you.
Mr. Jacobs, his man snapped to attention. Escort Dewey and her team to the brig. Then bring the bridge teleporter online and send them to engineering. A delighted salute.
Aye, sir. That's a death sentence,
said Dewey.
I should certainly hope so.
It might not have been if you'd spent your time preparing for your mission instead of sabotaging my ship.
What about them?
Jacobs jabbed his rifle towards Fuller and the rest. Agent 8 was starting to stir.
Toss them out at airlock,
said Loomis. No, said Blackwell. We don't want to tip our hand to the Xenos. Just shoot them. The red shirts on the bridge gaped in horror as Loomis arranged the three women in front of the main view screen.
Any last words?
The cogs all abruptly shifted and stood up. The one at Tactical walked over to him. Captain, incoming message from the Admiralty. Not now. It's priority 1, sir. Blackwell sighed. What is it? It appears to be in the form of a riddle. He snorted. A riddle? Indeed. The cog actually smiled. He didn't know they could do that. Fine, let's hear it. What begins with S and rhymes with nap? I don't know, he spat. What? The cog struck him across the face. Blackwell hit the deck, his whole head ringing, the taste of blood in his mouth. He scrambled up to find that the other cogs had disarmed his firing squad. Explain yourself! The cog shoved him back into his chair. The door to the bridge whisked open. In stepped a black woman clutching a pike topped with a cog's severed head. The condemned recognized her a split second before Blackwell. Webb! There was someone else with her. Someone slim, wrapped in a blanket that did nothing to conceal her fury. Blackwell's balls shrunk up into his body. Sunshine? That is not my name. Fuller's jaw dropped. Dewey crossed herself.
Holy mother of fucking God.
Blackwell's heart nearly froze. He saw it in her eyes. That look was the same as when she'd gone for him. Her hands like talons, her eyes aflame. And he knew she remembered. Blackwell looked like his brain had broken. For the first time Webb could remember, he was at a loss for words. Dennis, on the other hand, wasn't. Please transport me to the repair bay. Blackwell slowly rose, his eyes on Yolanda. Sunshine. Honey, I don't know what she's told you, but it's all a lie. Yolanda turned to Dennis. Repeat the Admiral's message. The cog slapped Blackwell back into the command chair. Yolanda? Peeped Frankie. Prime winked at her. Hey, sweetie. Another Yolanda? 8 leaned into Frankie. Which one is she? The first, said Frankie. Yolanda Prime. Blackwell spat out blood and a tooth. Get in here, he hissed into his pin. 8 darted forward and ripped it off his collar. Webb looked over the red shirts on the bridge. Maybe a dozen of them. Who's cleared to run con or ops? A few tried to raise their cuffed hands. Great, said Webb. Have the cogs remove your cuffs and get to those stations. The red shirts looked to Blackwell hunched before the command chair. He's not in charge here, said Yolanda.
The fuck he...
Was all Loomis managed before 8 slammed a rifle into his gut. He crumpled at her feet. How do you like it, huh? 8 kicked him in the ribs. You like that? Ass hole? No, don't. Stop. Dewey languidly lit a cigarette. You heard me. Don't stop. Blackwell's face purpled with rage and bruises. I am the captain! The Admiral outranks you, said Yolanda. The who? Hey, Webb waved. I cannot pretend I understand your command structure, said the ambassador. I may have reprogrammed her rank, said Yolanda. The tendon stood out in Blackwell's neck. That's not possible. Not with the ship, no, said Yolanda. But the Collective Operations Group is a closed system. You were wise to keep me off the controls, Jared.
Dewey took a rifle from a cog and turned towards the Armstrongs.
Asses to deck, now!
The Armstrongs sat.
The hell's going on here, Webb?
The Xenos are coming, said Webb. I don't know how much time we have. A beep from the ops console. A ship has entered the system, said the red shirt there. She stared at Webb expectantly. Oh, right. On screen. On the main viewer, a Coalition warship dropped out of Starflight, a bristling steel eagle made of hard angles and weapons. Webb cursed inwardly. The Liberator.
We're being hailed,
said the comm tech. Ignore it, said Webb.
Indy, on screen,
said Blackwell. Slap him if he talks again, Webb hissed at the cog. On the screen appeared a scowling man with a face carved out of granite.
This is Captain Sokola, the Liberator.
What the hell is on your hull? Blackwell's brow furrowed. Hull? Sokola blinked. He looked from Blackwell, bloody-faced on the floor, to the cog looming above him, to Webb, standing at the edge of the command dais with a cog's head on a spike. Webb concluded that he might get the wrong impression. Captain, I can explain. Sokola's face tightened, the feed abruptly cut off. The Liberator has dropped its shields, said the tech at Tactical. They're gonna board us! Lord. Webb ran a hand through her hair. This is gonna look bad. Raise shields. Shields are up, said Tactical.
They can still shoot us, said Dewey. Shields won't stop torpedoes.
No, but they'll keep them from teeping in.
Until they shoot us.
One crisis at a time, Chief. A series of low thumps from starboard. Dewey's eyes went wide as saucers.
Those felt like...
On screen, a trio of torpedoes streaked towards the Liberator, catching her amidships beneath her wing. A series of flame spouts geysered out of the ship, knocking it off axis. Direct hits, said the shocked redshirt at Tactical. They're venting atmosphere. Webb whirled on him. Did you fire? He shook his head, pale as chalk. I wasn't even touching the console. Then who fired? Torpedo control has been rerouted from Tactical, said the tech at Ops. To where? Webb felt sick. Not just because they'd just killed who knew how many crewmen, but because she suspected she knew the answer. Open comms to the starboard torpedo bay. There's no one there, said the red shirt at comm. Scans say it's empty. Of course they did. Please. The comms clicked on. Insectoid chittering flowed through the bridge.
How?
Dewey looked like a lost little girl.
How did they know how to do that?
Another round of thumps. A fresh volley of torpedoes hurtled towards the Liberator. They're targeting her reactor, said Tactical. Turn, Captain, Webb muttered. Turn. Trailing debris, the warship lurched to take the fusillade in its port nacelle. It erupted in a cluster of explosions and broke off, leaking plasma into orbit. They're dead in the water, said Tactical. Webb whimpered. Hail them. Flames bathed the bridge of the Liberator. Sokola staggered through the fallen bodies of his bridge crew.
You traitor! You backstabbing bitch!
Consoles exploded, rippling static across the feed.
There is nowhere you can go that we won't find you!
Captain. Webb eyed the Liberator's readouts, struggled to keep her voice steady. Your core is going critical. You need to abandon ship. He cut the transmission. Webb looked to Frankie. Can you teep out survivors? She shook her head. They've raised their shields. A negative chime. Warning, said Indy. Hull breach on deck 1. The power shorted, stuttering the lights. Klaxons blared, but not so loud that they drowned out the sound of tearing metal. Webb went ashen. They're here. A Xeno tore open the ceiling behind the ring of duty stations. It dropped onto the bridge and slashed through the ops console and the red shirt manning it in one smooth motion. Webb threw herself out of its path. More Xenos streamed down behind it. Cogs! Defend the bridge! As one, the collective operations group fired at the swarm, scattering a few. Don't shoot them! Grab them! The Cogs seized the closest Xenos, pinning their forelimbs to their sides. The pinned Xenos screamed, and others swarmed over the Cogs, hacking and slicing like a tornado of knives. Trillions of dollars in broken technology hit the floor.
The swarm roared around the duty station ring, slicing through anyone too stunned to move, encircling the survivors on the command dais. And there the Xenos held, bobbing and chittering a nightmare chorus. Webb backed into Frankie and 8, who'd fled to the dais with Yolanda, Dewey, and whoever else had survived the initial wave. At the back of the control ring, the swarm parted around the burnt Xeno. It stared at Webb like it recognized her, like it wanted her to see it, to see what it had done. With an odd calm, Webb realized she was going to die. She'd underestimated the Silicons, and now they'd killed 2 ships. She reached behind her, grasping hands with Frankie and Yolanda. At least they were together again. There were worse ways to go out. And hey, she'd finally made it to the bridge. She couldn't help but chuckle. The burnt Xeno cocked its head.
Dennis?
If the Xenos were going to give her a few more seconds, Webb was going to use them.
Open shipwide comms. Abandon ship. The bridge is overrun. Abandon.
A hunting horn blared over the comms.
Tally-ho!
A stream of agrochems slagged a clump of thickly packed Xenos. Through the sliding doors charged Abelhard, spraying like a maniacal crop duster. The burnt Xeno screeched. The swarm flowed and reformed into pincers flanking him. Webb hadn't yelled a warning before more jets shot in from the doorway, boiling away the Xenos like snowmen behind a jet engine. Haggard red shirts in spray packs trekked in behind Abelhard. Their leader flashed Webb a tired salute.
Sedlak!
Webb felt giddy.
Who the... The unassigned! They made it!
For love!
Bellowed Abelhard. He fired with abandon.
For honor! For the as-yet unknown village!
The remaining Xenos routed through the slumped remains of their fellows, fleeing back up through the gap in the ceiling or ripping new burrows through the floor. Sedlak nodded to Webb.
These things really work.
A grin split her face.
Thanks for the tip.
Abelhard struck a heroic pose beside Sedlak, his chin raised, his foot on the captain's chair. An invisible wind rippled his shirt and locks.
Sedlak
looked up at Abelhard.
Said he knew how to find you.
I had but to follow my heart,
rumbled Abelhard.
And the malware in my badge.
Webb curtsied.
Lord Mountworthy.
A rakish nod.
Ladies?
Frankie looked to Webb.
Explain.
He's from Seven's romance novel, said Webb. Thanks for that, by the way.
Yeah.
Frankie couldn't take her eyes off him.
No problem. No problem at all.
Do I smell lilac? And wood smoke?
He's very well rendered.
Dewey poked her in the ribs.
Hey, when you're done with Huncules there, could I maybe borrow the program?
Webb raised an eyebrow. Chief? Dewey shrugged.
If I gotta be on crutches, let me choose what for.
Frankie seized Webb's arm in a vice grip.
Webb, look!
A few weary soldiers in scarred armor followed the unassigned onto the bridge. Behind them, a haggard figure staggered in. The stump of her arm lashed to her chest. She saluted with her gun arm.
Chels?
Said Webb.
Sup, commies?
Chels collapsed onto the command rail. The quaddies rushed up to stabilize her. Her right arm was gone at the elbow, her sling crusted with blood.
Jesus, your arm. It's okay, I'm a lefty. Handed, I mean. How the hell are still... God damn it! Oh, let's say duty or honor. Truth is, I'm just on a fuck ton of stims.
She jammed a hypo into her neck. Her eyes rolled back.
That's the good shit. Take me to Wonderland. How many of those have you had? Shut up, Mom.
Chels blinked rapidly, frowned, and stared at the empty hypo.
Maybe I should take it easy. For a second there, I thought I saw Yolanda.
Hey, Jarhead, said Yolanda.
Yeah, overdid it on the stims.
We found them turtled in the main brig,
said Sedlak.
In the middle, said Chels. We turned on the cells, and that gave us force fields on 3 sides. The tractor rifles kept them off us.
The soldiers cornered the surviving Armstrongs, who surrendered without hesitation, but not without proclaiming their innocence and calling for unity, which reminded Webb.
Where the hell is Blackwell?
The quaddies exchanged glances. Webb checked the dead and wounded. Their uniforms were all red, not a trace of command purple. Her eyes went to the sealed door of the captain's cabin.
Lord,
said Abelhard.
did I say that right?
Indy, seal the doors. Blackwell collapsed on his viewing divan, where he had a panoramic view of the lifeboats spinning away from the burning Liberator. His ears pounded. They had abandoned him. All of them. The cogs, the crew, the Armstrongs who'd failed him in his greatest moment of need. Even Sunshine had left him. And after he'd saved her, shaped her, rebuilt her with his love and patience, after all that, betrayed him. No, worse than that. She'd been stolen from him. By that fucking crew rep. He knew how this would play out, how the lying media would spin things to make him look bad. The word of all those women and minorities against his. They'd lynch him in the press before he ever set foot in court. They'd blame him for the loss of the Liberator, paint him as the only captain to have ever lost 2 ships. He'd never hold another command. Hell, he'd be lucky if they didn't execute him, make him an example of what happens when you're too lenient with your crew. No way he'd allow them that satisfaction. His ship may be lost, overrun by savages and red shirts, but he had a mission to complete. It was poetic, in a way, that he would give his life killing a lie aimed at the very heart of what made the coalition great. It stung that no one would know of his sacrifice, but that was one of the qualities that separated the alphas from the betas, wasn't it? Doing what was required with neither hesitation nor complaint. He pulled himself up to his full height and straightened his uniform. Independence. Initiate self-destruct. Indy chimed. Please enter security code. Blackwell, Jared, Reagan Alpha 14, Rand Omega 88. Another chime. Please have the first officer enter his security code. He balked. What? The consent of the first officer is required for self-destruct. There is no first officer. Please have the first officer enter his security code. Bypass first officer code. A negative chime. Unable to comply. He roared wordless obscenities at the ceiling. The ship had turned against him as well. No matter. He rerouted tactical controls from the bridge to his cabin's console. If Indy wouldn't blow herself up, he'd force-feed her own torpedoes. Another negative chime. Weapons are offline. Blackwell slammed his fist on the console so hard he cracked the screen. He glared out at the burning ship listing towards the atmosphere. The burning warship. Indy, hail the Liberator. Priority 1 message. The bridge of the Liberator was a vision from hell. Sokola had torn off his uniform jacket and was sweating like a soot-streaked pig. Captain Sokola. Blackwell raised his chin. I regret to inform you that the mutineers have taken control. That's bloody obvious. Sokola didn't look up from his tactical station. Libby, check star drive ejection protocols. Star drive emergency ejection is functioning, reported the Liberator. Sokola glared up at him. Any last words to mark the end of your career, Mr. Blackwell? Just 4. Take me out, Captain. Sokola hesitated. Say that again? You spoke to the Admiral about Captain Fontana's message. I was briefed. The mutineers have discovered it. If they're allowed to escape, they'll take it mainstream. What do you expect me to do, Captain? My drive's about to nova. You still have weapons? Blackwell tapped a few keys. I've lowered our shields. Sokola checked his console. His nostrils flared. Blackwell saluted him. Do your duty, Captain. Avenge my ship. And yours. Sokola's cheek twitched. A wicked smile spread across his face. You're a good man, Blackwell. Webb! She whirled towards the tactical station. Our shields are down, yelled the red shirt there. The Liberator is powering weapons. Her stomach dropped. Get them back up. Control's been rerouted. To where? He stared at the captain's cabin. Webb's heart froze. You son of a... The Liberator fired. Torpedoes streaked toward the Independence. Webb seized the command rail.
Brace yourselves!
Explosions rocked the ship, flinging dead xenobits and dismembered cog parts around the bridge. A warning chime.
Critical damage, slurred the ship. Drive failure imminent. Damage report!
Webb roared over the klaxons.
Breach in engineering,
yelled Dewey.
It's depressurizing. We're going to lose the drive.
Warning, said Indy.
Orbit broken. Collision with atmosphere imminent.
The planet loomed closer.
The Liberator is powering weapons again.
Frankie had taken over tactical. Webb didn't know what happened to the other guy.
Hail them. No response, said Com.
Lurd.
Target her weapons and fire.
Frankie unloaded Indy's cannons into the Liberator's forward gigalaser array. A cascade of explosions ripped across her bow. Her bridge rocked with a detonation so big, Webb had to shield her eyes.
What happened? Her gigalaser's overloaded, said Frankie. Regulators must be down. Residual explosions are ongoing.
A streak of hot light shot out of the Liberator's belly. A knife's gash of radiance as its star drive ejector fired its compressed star out of the system. Another warning chime.
Drive failure in 2 minutes.
The Liberator star wouldn't be the only one rejoining the cosmos tonight. With leaden legs, Webb trudged to the command chair and toggled on the ship-wide comms.
Anyone who's still aboard, abandon ship. How?
Chelsea jabbed another stim in her neck.
Lifeboats are gone, and we're in decaying orbit, said Frankie.
Only one thing to do then.
Chief, take your station. 8 ops. Frankie, stay where you are. I've got the helm.
She stuck Dennis's head through the command rail and took the con.
Everyone else, brace yourselves.
For what, my lady?
We have to land.
Shocked silence.
But the Xenos,
said Sedlak.
We're caught in the planet's gravity well, said Webb. We have no power and we're losing pressurization. On the planet, we at least have a chance.
She buckled herself in.
I'll aim for the fields.
No one objected. The crew braced themselves against the bulkheads or wrapped their arms around the command ring. Chelsea buckled herself into the command chair. Abelhard squeezed Webb's shoulder.
You will deliver us, my lady. I have no doubt. Neither should you.
Warning, said Indy.
Drive failure in 30 seconds.
Webb took hold of the controls.
Eject the drive.
A negative chime.
Your privileges have been revoked. Jesus fuck! Would you take her offline?
Allow me. Dewey shot Indy's main relay.
Been wanting to do that for about 9 years.
She dropped the rifle, entered a code on her console.
Drive is away.
The ship rocked and roared as its star shot off towards infinity. Everything blacked out for a second before the emergency power kicked in. Webb pulled up the carceral matrix.
Ejecting the meat locker.
They'd have a much better chance floating in space than thawing on the planet. The linked cylinders of frozen crew had barely left the ejection shaft when the Liberator exploded. The shockwave knocked the Independence into the atmosphere. Webb wrestled to level out their descent as flames engulfed the outer bridge. She hoped the force fields patching the breaches would hold. With a roar of wrenching metal, the ship tore apart at the neck. The forward section plummeted with greater speed. Her vision tunneling. Webb hit the emergency thrusters. They didn't respond. Through the flames licking the view screen, the jagged strip of ruins came into view. The specks on the flats grew into dots that grew into fields. They were coming in too fast.
Brace for impact!
The ship hit the surface, bounced, and skidded towards the ruins like a supersonic toboggan. It struck the structure at an angle. Webb's head hit the console, and the lights went out.